News Saturday. Here's Carol Simpson.
Good evening. More than 20 Americans flew out of Iraq today, the first to depart since Saddam Hussein announced he would free all of his foreign captives. ABC's Karen Burns reports that all Americans should be out of Iraq and Kuwait very soon.
Passports of freedom, baby.
Bill Rodebush and his friend Bob Martin had hoped to leave Iraq together, but it wasn't to be.
That's okay. You go home and get the steaks ready.
Martin was taken off the list at the last minute. For someone who'd been waiting for 4 months, he took it remarkably well.
Tomorrow, or the next day.
In the tense minutes before departure, there was confusion over who would leave today and who might go tomorrow. Some hostages blamed the State Department and the U.S. Embassy and the private group who arranged for their release.
I am disgusted and upset at the way that it was handled.
Both the embassy and the group of private citizens headed by former Governor John Connally blamed Iraqi bureaucracy. But for Jack Stewart, who arrived at the last minute from a strategic site 4 hours away, this was one of the happiest days of his life. And it happens to be his birthday.
68 today.
How would you rate this birthday?
One of the best presents I've ever had.
23 hostages, including people from the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait and 8 relatives, finally made their way through customs and to the other side. If all goes according to plan, an American chartered plane will leave here tomorrow morning, fly to Kuwait to pick up the remaining Americans there, and come back to Iraq to pick up all of the other Americans. With any luck, by tomorrow night, all the American hostages from Iraq and Kuwait will be gone. Karen Burns, ABC News, Baghdad.
President Bush today expressed relief that Americans are finally being evacuated from Kuwait, but he insisted that Saddam Hussein's gesture has not brought the two sides in the Persian Gulf crisis any closer to a peaceful solution. Mr. Bush made those remarks in Venezuela as he was wrapping up his tour of South America. Here's ABC's Britt Hume.
A joint news conference with Venezuelan President Perez brought the first comment from President Bush on the planned evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait. That is something Iraq has long demanded and the U.S. has long resisted. But the president insisted it is not a concession to Saddam Hussein.
It is no payback.
No es recompensa.
And the feeling is that when every single American is out of Kuwait, we will clear the decks, and the embassy will have ceased to be fulfilling any day-to-day function.
Mr. Bush said his determination to get Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait is undiminished, and the embassy evacuation may actually make that easier.
I think you can make the case that this facilitates the tough decisions that might lie ahead.
And what he was asked, did he mean by that?
I just mean that when you don't have Americans there, and if force is required, that's just one less worry I've got.
Asked for his view on the use of force in the Gulf, Perez, who has backed the anti-Iraq effort by expanding Venezuela's oil output, said he supported the UN resolutions and the liberation of Kuwait. Perez never actually said he supported the use of force at this time, but he didn't say he opposed it either. President Bush seemed plenty satisfied with that. After all, it's more support than he's getting from leading members of the U.S. Congress, with whom he must deal when he gets home. Britt Hume, ABC News, Caracas.
President Bush today praised Venezuela for deciding to increase its oil production in the face of the oil cutoff from Iraq and Kuwait. That increased production will be of enormous benefit to the U.S., but it will be of even bigger benefit to Venezuela itself. ABC's John Quinones reports.
The petroleum fields of Lake Maracaibo, Venezuela, home to 16,000 oil wells and counting. Venezuela is sitting on a jackpot of oil deposits, 300 billion barrels. More oil than any other place in the world except perhaps Saudi Arabia. O.V. Stidham should know. He's an oil consultant from Midland, Texas, who's been drilling here for 14 years.
How easy is it to find oil here?
It's real easy. There's not many dry wells here.
Since the Persian Gulf crisis began, the government-owned Venezuelan Petroleum Company has increased oil production by 20% to 2.5 million barrels a day, 2/3 of it destined for the U.S.
With all that increased production, Venezuela stands to gain an extra $2 billion in petroleum revenues this year, For the U.S., just a 4-day trip across these waters, it means a convenient and reliable source of oil.
Analysts say it's an opportunity to gain valuable leverage on the international market.
We can change the geopolitics of oil by sending a signal to the Middle East that in the great oil reserves of Venezuela, there are simply enormous sources of oil, which could significantly reduce our own dependence upon the Middle East.
In the capital of Caracas this weekend, there's renewed optimism in the economy, talk of a return to the boom years of the 70s, when oil built this impressive skyline. The Venezuelan stock market is on a bullish roll. Still, no one has forgotten that the last boom here collapsed miserably after the fall of oil prices in the early 80s.
We have to look very careful in the future and not to count the chicken before they are born.
But even the oil minister admits the crisis in the Persian Gulf has brought much longed-for relief on Lake Maracaibo. The hope is that the renewed profits from this oil bonanza won't be short-lived. John Quinones, ABC News, Lake Maracaibo, Venezuela.
The latest developments in the Persian Gulf crisis.